PreCalculus, how to plot points in a Cartesian plane. In this tutorial, we will describe how to plot points in a Cartesian plane. For example, let us plot the following. Okay, so when we start talking about a Cartesian plane, first thing we need to talk about are the x-axis and the y-axis. Well, in the graph, in the picture here, we want to show that the horizontal axis represents x. So that's the x-axis. And it goes in a direction towards the right. And so that represents the x-axis. The other axis is a vertical line that crosses or intersects at a 90-degree angle, and so this is representing the y-axis. Usually at the point of intersection we call it the origin, and so when we look at, say for example, the x-axis starting from the origin and we start moving towards the positive or the direction of the axis, all of the points from the origin and in the positive direction would be positive values, and that would be towards the right as represented in the graph. From the origin on the same x-axis going in the opposite direction, the point values will have a negative value. When we look at the y-axis, starting at the origin, going up in the vertical upward direction, the points on the axis will have a positive value, and also from the origin going in the opposite direction on the y-axis, we will have points with a negative value. Now, to plot a point inside of the Cartesian plane, it's going to take two coordinates, and we call them ordinal positions because we want to represent plotting a point with an x and a y value. And what it shows is that x value has to be first because it is positional. That represents the distance from the y-axis, and when we talk about the y value, it represents the distance from the x-axis. So when we have a Cartesian formed by two lines that intersects at a 90-degree angle, they form four sections. The first section represents the quadrant 1. And when we have a quadrant 1, what we're saying is that when we actually plot a point, that the x value would be positive and also the y value will be positive. We move towards the left here, we have this quadrant 2. Quadrant 2, any points that resides in the second quadrant will have an x value that is negative and a y value that's positive. And if we move down below, this is quadrant 3. And inside where a point resides in quadrant 3, we're pretty much saying that the x value would be negative and the y value will also be negative. And the fourth and final section is quadrant 4. And when we plot a point in the fourth quadrant, what we're saying is that the x value will be positive and the y value will be negative. All right, so let's plot a few points and let's see what happens. So let's first start off with the origin. Let's go back and let's look at, let's use A and look at the origin. Okay, so what does this tell us is that, let's go back here. Okay, so we say we plot a point, it's two coordinate values. So we have the x and we have a y. And in this case here, we're saying that for the origin, it's 0, 0. So what does that mean? Well, actually, for the first position, when we say that it represents x, what it shows is that it's a distance of 0 from the x-axis. So there's no movement right there. When we look at the y value, we also see that as 0. And what it tells us that the y value represents the distance from the x-axis. And because it's 0, there's no movement. So it sits right there in the beginning. Next, let us plot a point in quadrant 1. So let's start off with, let's come up with a sample. In this case, we're going to use the value 6 and 2. And so let's go ahead and plot the point, and we're going to show why we derive that point. So let's see, A, and let's say 6, 2. Not 20, but 2. All right, so we have a point A resides right here. We're saying that the coordinates for this point is 6, 2, and let's show why. All right, so starting at the origin, we want to show is we're starting at the origin and the point is to the right of the y-axis. Remember, we say that the y value represents the distance of the point from the y-axis. All right, so starting at the origin, going towards the right, we show 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then for the y value, we said that y represents the distance from the x-axis up to the point. So we go up, we have a value of 1 and 2. And so it shows that the point does represents the coordinates 6, 2. And why? Is because starting from the origin here, we show that there was a distance from the y-axis to the point of a value of 6. Also, for the y value of 2, we show that from the x-axis to the point is a distance of 2. And that's what we wanted to show. Next, let us plot a point in the second quadrant. So for this example, since we use 6, 2, let's just use a very similar coordinate. We're going to use -6 and a y value of 2. So let's go ahead and plot it. Let's go ahead and say we have A equals -6 and 2, not 20 but 2. All right, so we have our A. So what we're saying is this point in the grid here is indeed a point represented using the coordinates -6 and 2. So we're going to actually show why. Okay, so starting from the origin, we're going to go towards the left. And remember that the positive values in the x-axis is going towards the right. But in this case, we're going towards the left. So start, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And for the y value, it represents the distance from the x-axis. So we go upward. So we have 1 and 2. Why? Because we have, from the origin, we have a distance of 6 going along the x-axis in the left direction. Even though it shows -6, but the negative represents the direction. But the magnitude from the origin to the point is a distance of 6. For the y value, we also showed that we have a value or distance from the x-axis to the point of 2. And this is what we wanted to show. Next, let's plot a point in quadrant 3. Since we were using previously the value 6, 2, let's go ahead and continue with this example. So we're going to show the plot minus 6 and minus 2. Alright, so let's plot it. So we have A is minus 6 and minus 2. Plot it. Alright, so we have our plot, and we want to show that this plot is represented with the coordinates minus 6, minus 2. Okay, so starting from the origin, we're going to go towards the left. So we're going to go a distance of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. For the y, we going down, keyword down, a distance of 2. So we go 1 and 2. And so the point A here represents the coordinates minus 6, minus 2. And y, again, we have from the origin, we have a distance of 6 from the point to the y-axis. And for the value 2, we have a distance of 2 from the x-axis to the point. But keep in mind that in this case, the minus y values, because the y is going in an upward direction, that represents the positive value, and any value after the origin will represent negative. So the coordinates minus 6, minus 2 represent point A in this coordinates, and this is what we wanted to show. Next, let's plot a point in quadrant 4. So we were using the values in other coordinates. We used 6 and 2. So for this case, to plot a point in the 4th quadrant, we're going to use a value 6 and minus 2. Alright, so let's plot the point. We have A equals 6 and minus 2. And so we have the point. The point is plotted. So let's start from the origin. Let's show, we want to show that this point is represented by the value, actually it's not minus 6, it's actually 6 and 2, negative 2. Alright, so from the origin, we move towards the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Then we come down 1, 2. And so that represents the point A. 6 and minus 2 is the coordinates. So why is this? We want to show that we went a distance of 6 from the y-axis to the point. And also for the minus 2, we went a distance of 2 from the x-axis to the point. But that direction from the x-axis was in a down position. So that represented negative. And this is what we wanted to show. This puts us in a position for my next tutorial, where we describe how to apply the distance formula and find the distance between 2 points in a plane. I hope this tutorial was helpful. If you find this tutorial to be helpful, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Also, feel free to join us here at the Computing Sector. There will be more videos and tutorials coming soon. Thanks.